Okay, so it's over. Yeah? Yeah. Yeah? Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah. So it's 5 days after the election, and everything seems to be wrapped up. I think. Myself, like a lot of Australians, have just been sitting back and eating up the election. Watching those states swing. And I'm not going to lie, I was sad to see it over. So you bet a little smile came to my face when I saw that Donald Trump was still claiming that he's won. But to be fair, the media warned us about this. Trump was always going to reject the official narrative. But that got me wondering, is the race being over the official narrative? So the first place I've taken a look is Decision Desk, and it looks like Biden's got his 279 votes. He's over the 270 he needs to win, and that means he's the president-elect. Or more accurately, what's called the projected president-elect, which, to be fair, is almost always the same as the president-elect. But not always. In 2000, the election came down to a Supreme Court decision, and on the day of the election, the media called it, but it wasn't properly overturned until 36 days later in the Supreme Court. An archived Washington Post article about the night has some really interesting quotes about it. I'm not sure how to pronounce these names, but I'm going to go with Brokaw. So NBC's Tom Brokaw said, "We don't just have egg on our face, we have an omelette." Tom Rosenstiel, who's director of the Project for Excellence in Journalism, said on CNN, "I'm not sure television's had as bad night as this." But the really interesting one here is Marvin Kalb, who's the executive director on press and politics at Harvard University. He was quoted saying, "Television news is supposed to cover the news. It is not supposed to be a player, certainly not a player on the scale that was demonstrated last night." Another interesting article I found is an article on the 21st of December by Jeffrey Toobin, which is titled "The Legal Fight Awaiting Us After the Election," and it pretty clearly outlines the same things I have in the 2000 election, and says that it's almost inevitable this is going to court. I hate to be the guy who pulls out Wikipedia, but it's the only place I could find anything with the Constitution. So it clearly outlines that if no one concedes, the election will go to one vote from the Electoral College for the president and one vote from the Electoral College for vice president. And I think we can pretty safely rule out concession here. So the fact is, it's going to have to go to the Supreme Court. So in the meantime, we might as well check the possibility of fraud. That brings me to my second question. Is voter fraud possible? I'm not going to lie, this one's hard to tell from a distance. And by a distance, I mean the distance to Australia, not the 30 feet the officials were told to stand from the ballots. Still, I feel as though the best way is to ask Americans through a trusted source like the Washington Post. Most Americans expect cheating in the November elections. Now, this has quite a few interesting points, but there's some key ones I want to point out. Firstly, a lot of people have been told that the only reason Republicans are worried about mail-in voting is because it's mainly going to be used by Democrats, which could be possible, except this Washington Post article shows that 42% of Biden supporters are still worried about mail-in voting. Yes, 87% of Trump supporters are, but this is still 1/3 of Democrats that are worried about mail-in voting. Are they worried about Biden getting too many votes? Another really interesting stat is it shows a sizable majority of both Trump, 75%, and Biden supporters, 60%, are concerned about the threat of cheating by election officials. So this says that 40% of Biden supporters were worried about mail-in voting, and 60% were worried about election officials cheating. And suddenly that concern's all gone away? I do find it a little bit interesting that mail-in voting, which has been promoted to be more secure than The Rock's next 5 movie deals, is still seen to be fraudulent by over 1/3 of Democrats. So that brings up my next question. Does mail-in voting increase the chance of fraud? So once again, we go to the trusty Washington Post, and Trump's concerns about mail-in ballots is completely legitimate. This article points out quite a few reasons why it's legitimate. Actually, I was going to skip through this, but I think it's worth reading. Really, in 2012, before mail-in voting became a partisan political litmus test, the New York Times published an article titled "Error and Fraud at Issues as Absentee Voting Rises." The piece noted that there's a bipartisan consensus that voting by mail is easily more abused than other forms. A bipartisan commission on the federal election reform, chaired by former President Jimmy Carter and former Secretary of State James A. Baker, concluded in 2005 that absentee ballots remain the largest source of potential voter fraud, and that vote-buying schemes are far more difficult to detect when citizens vote by mail. Carter and Baker also pointed out that citizens who vote at nursing homes are more susceptible to pressure, overt and subtle, or intimidation. In Florida, there is even a name for this: granny farming. The article that he's linking to here is by the New York Times in 2012, which once again shows that mail-in voting has some serious issues. So then I find this BBC article that was written 2 days ago. Do postal ballots lead to voting fraud? And they point to all of these examples where Donald Trump has claimed there is fraud by saying 500,000 applications went out or 100,000 ballots went out. And then they've went on to say these things did happen, but the board has said since that it was a serious mistake. Whether it was a mistake or not, if the best evidence you have against these things being fraudulent is, yeah, but we didn't mean it, it sort of proves their point for them. Okay, so it seems at least worth checking to see if voter fraud happened, because these systems have been put in place that the Washington Post and the New York Times agree increases the potential for voter fraud. So the next question we've got to ask ourselves is there any legitimate issues worth investigating? Now, there's obviously a lot of issues being raised, and some of them are bullshit and some of them are possibly legitimate. It's really hard to know before any of them go into court, but there is one case that I want to show which I found at least interesting. Now, you've probably seen them, but the claims are that a glitch caused 6,000 Trump votes to go to Biden. Now, obviously this isn't the case, but with at least 47 counties using this software, and this software had the potential to f up 6,000 votes. This is the potential for 282,000 votes from a glitch alone. Now, once again, I'm trying to find articles that disprove this, but the best I can find is people saying that the theory has no merit and that what was a so-called glitch was actually, and I quote, an embarrassing human error that I'm sure we've all been guilty of before, putting off a software update for too long. Then what the f was a previous software program to do? I guess the biggest question above all of these is, does it make a difference? I would argue, unless you want a serious divide, absolutely. Trump got 5 million more votes than Obama. That's 71 million Americans simply want to know if they lost fairly. And 75 million for Biden, who equally deserve to know if they won fairly. Wanting to ensure a fair election should be a bipartisan issue. If you're a Republican, you obviously want to recount. And if it shows that Biden wins, then you can be happy that, other than the big job, you did very well in the House and looks like you've maintained the Senate. And if you're a Democrat, you don't want 4 years of people in your ears about mail-in voting. Prove the victory. I think after 4 years of Russia, the country seems like it's had enough of it. Ensure the win is fair, and if by some chance Trump wins, don't burn the country down. It's in everyone's best interest to ensure a fair election. And I got to be honest, I do find it a little bit insincere that the Russian collusion, impeachment, not my president crowd are now parroting that allowing courts to decide elections is somehow destroying the fabric of democracy.
What I didn't know is that it would hurt so much. I didn't expect this to break my heart. For him to cast a dark shadow on our most sacred right.
Trump knows he's an illegitimate president.
Biden will most likely get it. Trump, on an off chance, could. If no decision is made by Inauguration Day, Nancy Pelosi becomes president. And if it's a draw, the House would elect Biden as president and the Senate would elect the VP, setting up for what would no doubt be the greatest season of all time. As a final thought, honestly, it's difficult for me to understand why in such a contested election, so many processes which the Washington Post and the New York Times admitted increases the possibility of fraud were encouraged. Thankfully, these fine establishments have explained that all for us. Mail-in voting is good because COVID. Signature and voter ID verification is bad because racism. Electoral college is bad because it's unconstitutional, which raises questions as it's in the Constitution. Extensions on voting by mail in swing states is good because COVID. And any investigations into voter fraud destroys the integrity of our elections. If you were, however, a crazy conspiracy theorist or a fan of Occam's razor, you might think there was an effort to deliberately remove election security measures to make fraudulent voting easier. Thank you for watching. If you liked the video, please click like, subscribe, and with this one, I'd really appreciate it if anyone would share because I can't imagine this is going to go very far without it. Anyways, cheers.